Hello, our amazing listeners of Neurocareers doing the impossible. It's your podcast host, Dr. Milena Korostenskaya, or simply Dr. K. And I'm excited to welcome you to the second season of our podcast, exploring entrepreneurial careers in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. Have you ever wondered what it takes to transform brain science into groundbreaking products and services? Are you curious about the fearless visionaries who bridge the gap between neuroscience and entrepreneurship to change people's life and reshape our world? Are you ready to explore how to navigate the uncharted waters of neurotech entrepreneurship? In season 2, we're diving deep into the world of entrepreneurial ventures in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. If you are looking to create an immediate impact and translate your neuroscience and neurotech ideas into innovative services that truly make a difference in the world, this season is tailor-made for you. Join us and learn from the best in the field about succeeding in the entrepreneurial journey in neuroscience and neurotechnology where innovation meets impact. We've got an incredible lineup of guests who are not only shaped their careers but have also made a profound impact on the field. Throughout this season, we'll explore the captivating stories of visionaries who've risen to the challenge, who've turned obstacles into opportunities, and who've innovated in ways that are changing the landscape of neurocareers. So, whether you are a seasoned professional in the field, an inspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the intersection of science and business in this ever evolving arena, the season promises inspiration, education, and a glimpse into the exciting future of neurocareers. I am Dr. Milena Korostenskaya, the founder of the Institute of Neuroapproaches, where I help people establish successful careers in neuroscience and neurotechnologies through career coaching and education. So let's dive into the entrepreneurial journeys that are shaping the future of neuroscience and neurotechnologies together. Tune in now into the thrilling episode number 60. Greetings, curious minds, and welcome to another enlightening episode of Neurocareers Doing the Impossible podcast. Today, we're embarking on a journey that unravels the intricate pathways of careers in neuroscience and neurotechnology. And our guide through this captivating exploration is Dr. Mandana Ahmadi, a trailblazer in the realm of mental health technology and founder of Alena. Imagine this, a childhood marked by challenges that ignited Dr. Ahmadi's curiosity about the complexities of the human experience. Fast forward to an honors degree in physics from the University of Maryland, followed by a PhD in computational neuroscience at UCL. But that's just the prelude to a remarkable tale. With an unwavering commitment to making a tangible impact, Dr. Ahmadi founded Alena, a platform that's transforming mental health support. Alena is more than technology. It's a movement inspired by the fusion of science and compassion. It's a pioneering example of how careers in neuroscience can shape the future. So, fellow learners, join us on our journey through the pathways of careers in neuroscience and neurotechnology, guided by Dr. Mandana Ahmadi's exceptional journey and the pioneering strides of Alena. The episode promises insights, inspiration, and a glimpse into the boundless possibilities that lie within these dynamic fields. Welcome, Dr. Ahmadi. It's a great pleasure to have you today on our podcast. Thank you for coming. Can you tell us where you are joining us from and where you do all your work? And also, brief introduction, and of course, we will go more in depth as we continue with our podcast.
Thank you very much, Milena, for this wonderful and humbling introduction to me. Really appreciate having me on your podcast. So, as you noted, I am a scientist by training. In heart, I have always been since my childhood. I always wanted to understand things from an objective perspective. I had a hard time just believing things as it was told to me. I had to see evidence, and that evidence-based curiosity has carried on with me throughout my not only education but also career, and ultimately coming to the point of me creating Alena.
Thank you so much. I'm always curious, when does it start in the childhood? When do you notice that you're curious about things, you have that scientific evidence-based curiosity, yes, for things? Can you give us just a quick tour back into the past when all this started for you?
Absolutely. So I grew up during war, revolution, sanctions. I was born in Iran during a time of turmoil. So as a child, your environment looks normal, no matter where you're born to or what you're born into, because that's all you know. And war was all I knew, because the moment I was born, that was what it was about. When I was about 7, 8 years old, one day I woke up, and I can tell you this was the scariest moment of my life. Everybody was very unusually happy. The doors are open, people were dancing on the streets, and I'm like, what happened? It was just like overnight, there was this weird transformation that had happened to people, where the days before they were all gray and worried and lethargic and unmotivated. But suddenly there was motivation to celebrate, to build, to create, to live life, to enjoy family, to be hopeful for the future. So that was the very first time, this sudden event in my life that made me realize, yes, environment and everything does make and play a role in how we live our lives. But beyond that is our beliefs, is our state of mind that can make us do things or have hopes for the future or not have hopes for the future, reach out to people or not reach out to people. So much of our lives is lived within our head, and the mental state makes a big difference in how we shape our lives towards the future. So that was the very first, that was the very first steps towards the journey of Alena. Back then, I didn't know what mental health means. It wasn't even a terminology in my culture back then. And it actually took many, many, many years until I was introduced to the vocabulary and understanding what it actually means. However, what I did know was that event inspired me to study the brain and understand how the brain works. How are we different from each other, individual to individual, born in the same place? We go so different ways and we do so many different things. And where does all of that come from? So I started studying pharmacology because I wanted to understand the chemistry of the brain, even though I had already studied quite extensively in terms of psychology and even wellness and many things from different cultures, from the science. So how from like a heuristic perspective, people approach it. But then back then, the only thing available to me to understand it objectively was pharmacology, chemistry and biology of the brain. So when I was studying that, and I was doing research, one day someone knocked on the lab's door and said, "You're this crazy about understanding the brain. Do you know about computational neuroscience?" I'm like, what? What kind of creature is that? And yes, and that knock on the door changed my life. I was told that there are these two gentlemen. One of them was a faculty from New York University, and another one was faculty at Niels Bohr Institute in Denmark. They had visited Tehran, capital of Iran, and they were giving a 3 days workshop to introduce the field to the country. I took a bus ride there and I was mesmerized. And those 3 days, that was it. I decided to switch fields. I asked, what should I do? Well, you need to study physics first, because this is about the mathematics of the brain, describing it in mathematical language. So you need to have a strong math background. Now, up to this point, biology and chemistry, this was all I had studied mostly. So this sudden switch to math was quite, it was a switch. But I did that, and I then went on to study physics in University of Maryland with honors degree, because I was in a rush to go and study computational neuroscience at Gatsby, UCL, which about 15, 20 years ago, this was like the very first place, literally on the planet, that would teach computational neuroscience and machine learning. That was the best place to go and study and learn from the best. So that is my entry to the field.
Yes, thank you so much. And what was that event that made all people so happy in your childhood? And also you mentioned that was the scariest moment for you. Why this happy moment was so scary for you?
Yeah, I know that is such a contradiction in terms, isn't it? So, of course, what had made people very happy was the agreement to cease fire between Iran and Iraq. So the idea was that let's just stop the war and build lives, and let us stop this destruction and insanity. So, yeah, the happiness came from that, from the idea that, well, I am not threatened. My life is not threatened. My properties is not threatened. My loved ones are not threatened. There is a future that if I build for, if I work for, I can have the hope that I can see the fruits of it. I can build and I can dream without someone stealing it away or destroying it. And as humans, we are dreamers. That's why we don't live in caves anymore. That's why we don't have nests in bushes and things like that. We dream and we build upon generations, and we work hard for that, and we hand it to the next generation. And the idea of this continuity was what had given rise to all this extreme happiness, because up to the day before, there was no hope. Life was clocking time away, days away, nights away, with the uncertainty and not knowing what happens next, suddenly to this state of, now I can build my life. So that was this moment that made the entire country to just rejoice and unite in happiness. Hope, that was what it was about. Now, the reason it was scary for me was, to me, it was borderline manic. Because remember, as a child, what I was used to was lethargy, depression, sadness, and destruction. And this extreme hope and extreme happiness was borderline manic. Like, what is happening with these people? I've never, ever seen anything like that in my life. And it wasn't one person or two person or three people. It was like the entire country. So, yeah, that exoticness, that alien feeling, that was scary. It was momentary. Like, by the end of the day, I was happily joining in and enjoying it. But the starting experience, it was really scary.
Yes, that is very unusual experience when the people's state goes from one completely different into opposite. And I understand as a child, especially, it's very alarming because as children, we're so sensitive to everything what's happening. And we also don't understand everything. So it takes time for us to process all this information. And then your journey looks very interesting, and definitely you felt very motivated. So what I see, that you were very motivated to find answers to your questions. Yes, about the mental health, about how our brain works. What was that maybe one question that you were trying to answer through all this journey and learning about psychology and then pharmacology, then going to computational neuroscience? Was it maybe there was some idea, yes, some main question behind it that was keeping you going no matter what, even studying math just after chemistry and biology, yes, which wasn't very easy, I'm sure. So, what was that?
I would say the one question was and is for me, can we go beyond barriers? And the very first barriers that I saw that became very notable for me to see how lives can be affected was due to the war, because I had seen people, right? They were living normal life, then they would be sent to the front line, and if they were lucky, they would come back, but they would never come back the same. Often they would come back, if not physically injured, definitely emotionally and mentally injured. You would never come back the same after seeing all those atrocious, all those horrible things that can happen. And what I could then see is that this was the very first exposure that I had to effect of disabilities, visible and invisible, into quality of life of people and quality of life of people around them, and the future we are creating together as the humanity. So, and as I grew older, I became more and more and more aware that we are very diverse, we are very different, individual to individual, we're so different from each other. And each of us have this universe inside us. We are all untold stories waiting to be written, but not all of us have had the luck or the opportunity to be able to fulfill and capitalize on those potentials, on our strengths, and our weaknesses not come on our way. I give you an example. Suppose you have immense talent to be a musician, yeah? But if you don't have legs and you can never commute to a place where you would learn music, you would go to a place where you could go and perform and do all of those things, music dies away. That music would never make it into anyone's life. It's like a flower that dies in a spot. And I have seen that happen a lot. And I was always very interested to understand, is there a way for us to go beyond these barriers, man-made and nature-made? And given that most of these things are in our head, like all of these things happen, and like some people are their own biggest barriers, like they believe I can't, or they're too shy to go and reach out, or many of those things. What are those mechanisms in our brain that stops us from doing those things? And can we find a way to either modify them or augment the person? We augment ourselves in many ways. We use Google Map. That's an augmentation. Yeah, I just put it on audio and it tells me where to go and I find my direction without ever needing to think about it. Cars are a way of augmentation. We transport like crazy, while before we had to walk. So why can't we do that when it comes about our mental capacity, our emotional capacities? Can we increase that? Is there a way to do that? And that is why I studied brain sciences, and that's what we are trying to do at Alena.
Thank you so much. That is very inspiring. And indeed, I think the main barriers are the ones that we have for ourselves. So if we can find a way to overcome it, life would be so much different.
Yeah.
You had a fairly unusual career, especially at those times when people didn't know much about computational neuroscience. You said it was the first program. Yes, I'm sure that there were people who maybe didn't understand what you're doing, people who surrounded you, maybe knew you. How did they react at your attempts to become, yes, a neuroscientist?
Should I be honest?
Yes.
They thought I've gone crazy. because I had a bright career to study pharmacology, or could, and that's a field that if you're good in, you could make quite good fortune out of. You could live a comfortable life without too much, So it was a very competitive field to get into. In Iran, it's very hard to get to these competitive fields at university. It's crazy entrance exam. And yeah, I had worked very hard. I was sitting in to study this. And the idea of me just throwing out of the window and going after this unknown thing that nobody even knows what kind of future career you want to have, like, you are crazy. You're crazy. And yeah, it was a crazy thing to do. But then again, it is really about believing in oneself. For me, it wasn't the field I was after. It was the tools the field would give me to achieve my goal. I didn't study pharmacology to become rich or have a comfortable career or do any of those things. That wasn't my goal when I worked very hard to go and do that. I did that to understand how the brain works and to find ways to use that knowledge to help myself and help people. And that was my way of contributing to the world. And now there was this new field that looked very promising. And I thought, this was over 20 years ago. And I thought, this is going to be the future. Machine learning, AI, computational neuroscience, all of these is going to be the future. And here we are. It seems I wasn't too wrong.
Yes, now we have evidence, yes, that you were absolutely right and to pursue this career. What helped you? What type of mindset to really change what you were learning, to start learning math, to start learning about machine learning, yes, to physics, which is a very particular field of study. Yes, it requires a very different mindset. So how did it work for you? What did it take for you to do this switch? And how long did it take for you?
Someone once told me, you look like a woman on a mission. So, like the way you walk, the way you move. And I don't know what that means, but apparently this is how I appear to people. But maybe it is because I am on a mission. For me, the kind of impact that I have is the reward and joy I get from life. I take energy and happiness when the world around me is beautiful. Like when I stroll in a beautifully made garden, I love that. That is so soothing. When I eat a good food, that is great. When I enjoy time with family and loved ones, that is just wonderful. So having impact is what drives me. I'm an impact driven person. And when I did the switch, I switched to a field that I literally believed up to the point of switching. And even when I switched, I will be very rubbish at, because I tried math when I was growing up and I wasn't as good at it as I was with biology and chemistry and all of those stuff. But you know what? I realized most of those things is, again, it was in my head. The moment I knew why I'm studying this field, the moment I could see the use for it, I put effort into it. And the more effort you put into something and the better you get at it, the easier it becomes. And I wasn't letting it go until I would stay up and work very hard. So it was lots of hard work, but very rewarding.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great example for those who think that a certain field might be too hard for them to study. It really comes to the motivation and hard work.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think things are hard because we don't know how to do them. And the best way to go after it, or at least for me, is like, okay, it's hard. I'll start small. You don't climb a mountain from day one with the first step. You start with tiny steps. You camp here, you camp there, and you try to enjoy the journey rather than making it a goal. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. So you started computational neuroscience. What happened? What did you discover? And what was that time when you started thinking about creating something on your own?
So when I started computational neuroscience, it was magic. It was incredible to see how much we can understand about the brain, and suddenly lots of things about daily life and people and events and many things made so much sense to me. And one thing I realized was what people around me had tried to tell me when I switched fields, that many of those things just happen in academia and stay in academia. So as a computational neuroscientist, the best I could do was to pursue a career in academia, become a family faculty member, and having my own research and create more research and create more understanding that would then be handed down to other people who would then work on it and create more understanding. But then that was it. It would stop at understanding and it wouldn't make its way to society. And when I was near graduation, I gave birth to my first child and I nearly died twice. So, as you can imagine, it was a very unsettling and upsetting event for me. I was traumatized. But then I realized that lots of support, first of all, there is a huge competition over support, and you are to be lucky to get it in the first place and to get it from someone who is really good. And that was the very first time that I realized I understand so much. I can see what's happening with me. I can see what's happening with people. But then why are people waiting? Like these things are, some of them are outdated by decades. And why? Why is this happening? And that was the time when I decided that I am going to leave academia because there is people more talented, smarter, greater than me who are doing amazing science. And I'll do this translation of the science into everyday use for people, because that way I can solve this accessibility problem and I can bring the highest quality of support to people who otherwise would be struggling in getting it. And that's the beginning of Alena then.
Yes. And what's about the name Alena? What does it signify?
Alena is a variant of Helena, which means a shining light. And we are hoping our work to be like a light that shines and opens a path for people and help them go beyond what otherwise would look dark and inaccessible to them.
Mhm. Thank you. And now you made this choice to do translational work, yes, to create something for a society based on the knowledge you have. This now becomes more and more familiar path to people, and still it's not very familiar because, like you said, all we know after doing PhD is to continue our work in academia. So this fairly new known path into the future. At that time, I'm sure that doing translational work, creating something on your own, wasn't that familiar to people. So you were again on your way to do something unusual, something new. So can you share with our listeners, how did you start? How did you solve those unknowns? How you were discovering where to start, what to do? What were the first steps for you towards achieving your goal?
That is a very good question. And most of these things are unfolding events. It's like a journey rather than like one thing that's happening. And one thing I have learned about life is if you have a goal that you're really determined to achieve, that gives an ability to spot potential opportunities. And if you're not frightened to tap into them and ask, you can go far. So the story of how Alena actually came then finally to existence is kind of an interesting one and goes back again to my daughter. When my daughter was around 4 years old, I was standing in the schoolyard waiting to pick her up, and there were all these parents standing. And I saw this gentleman who was on his phone and waiting to pick up his son. And me being me, and I am so interested in people. For me, as I told you, everybody is a story. And I love, love, love stories. We struck a conversation. And it appeared to be that we just then became friends. And I became friends with his wife and wonderful, amazing people. And it came to be known that he is investing in early stage startups, which at the time I was also thinking about. So I'm like, wow, look at this, the universe. Like, what are the odds? And I told him about me being a scientist and being in the field of machine learning and computational neuroscience. This was quite it had started to become a hot topic with incorporation of DeepMind and its acquisition by Google and whatnot. And I told him I want to understand a little bit, learn how a company comes to an existence. How do you even start a startup? So he took me with him to the pitch presentations where companies would pitch to him as an investor. So I would learn how they think, how things are done. And in return, I would vet them, their technology and their science for him. So it was a nice symbiotic relationship. And after I felt like I've understood a little bit, I told him now I want to have my own startup. And I told him about the idea. The very first idea, he said, that is, maybe you need to think a little bit like in terms of scalability and all of those. And eventually we came to what we have today as Alena. And at that point, he said, you know what, let's do this together. And he and I started Alena. Yeah.
That's a beautiful story. And again, about communication and building connections, networking. Yes,
right.
that even just a person standing nearby talking on the phone might become your best ally at
Absolutely.
starting your company. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is the beauty of every single person. To be honest, when I talk to people, I see everybody wants to make the world around them to different and various degrees better. That is why we do what we do. And of course, we sometimes feel frustrated and tired and angry and all of those negative emotions. But to me, even negative emotions is a sign of care. We want it different and it's not. And that is why change happens. It happens because of us working together and through all of this. And networking and doing it together is the way humans have been doing it for thousands of years. Continues up to date too.
Yes, absolutely. So you got an ally, yes, with whom you were able already to start something. So what were the next steps? And maybe before we start the next steps, now, Alena, it was already an idea that you pitched, that you explained, that you already were confident about. What was the idea?
So the idea was to use computational psychiatry, which is a branch of computational neuroscience. So computational neuroscience is about understanding the brain as a machine, how it interacts with the environment, and how it comes to create behaviors and feelings and reactions and actions and intentions. How does it do it, right? Computational psychiatry is about when it goes wrong. Sort of that becomes then the kingdom of mental health, let's put it that way. So the idea was to use computational psychiatry to objectively assess the working of a person's brain. The idea here is that our behavior and our emotions and all the things we do and not do, these are outputs of some processes in our brain. Our cogs in our brain that moves together and work together, and they output something which then our body executes. And we can use this field to measure those cognitive processes and then write out the equation that governs them. The same way we can write an equation for how a plane flies or how gravity works or how Google Map can tell us directions. We can do the same thing for the working of the brain. And then we use that to assess the level of health of this cognitive process. And from there, you can then predict what intervention can modify this cognitive process so that it can then start performing healthy given the environment. Now, bear in mind, the idea here is not that people are broken and now we need to fix them. That is not the idea, because everything has a reason. Like, there is variability between us because through millions of years of evolution, our ancestors lived in places where survival required different wiring of the brain, right? And that's why we're different from each other. But now, with advancement of technology, we live in very sort of uniform environments. Yes, some are poorer, some are richer, but altogether, we live in very similar environments. And that means that it is fit for a narrow band of people, and the rest of us don't fit in this. Our wiring doesn't exactly work with this. And this clash of how our brain works and our environment gives rise to these mental health issues. Think about it. If suddenly the world becomes a sort of like covered in clouds and dark, right? Probably people who are evolved to live in the North Pole, in the Arctic, would have less of a problem adjusting and living than someone like me, who was born in a place where my body needs a lot of sun to absorb and do vitamin D, like, right? Otherwise, I will suffer. So just because the world changes doesn't mean I'm broken, but there is a breakdown between me and my environment. And this is what's happening. And as the technology becomes more and more advanced, lives become more and more uniform, we will have this problem where our brains start deviating from what it was evolved to actually do. So the idea here is to measure it and understand exactly what is different. What would your brain need to do to survive in this environment, and then help modify it or augment it, as I said initially, so that it can function easily. And then that's it. If we have hope, if we have control, because what we do makes a difference in our lives, in our environment, we can create healthy connections with other people. That is the definition of mental health. So it was about a tool that can help us have a healthy mental state, rather than the tool itself become like a companion we can talk to and deal with our problems, if you know what I mean.
I'm just curious, what is this certainty with which we can really describe mathematically, or using formulas, one or another mental state that we have? What are those limits?
Yes. So, of course, there is nothing in life that's certain but death. So, the same way, they have their own limitations, but to a good degree, we can make good predictions with reasonable certainty about what could or could not work for someone, or the working of their mind. This is something that will get more and more accurate as research and science moves forward to the future. And so I can't say it's 100% true, but nothing is 100% true.
Yes, that's true.
That is true.
Yes. So you had a beautiful idea. You had the support, but it's not enough just to have an idea. Yes, the most challenging part comes when you start implementing that idea into reality. You needed to assemble a team. You needed to start developing your application, your program, Alena. How did all work? What were your main steps in this process?
You are absolutely right. There are lots of ideas, and what matters is not the idea, but the execution of the idea. And that very much depends on the team that one has together. It's about convincing people, not convincing, but explaining to people what it is that, what is the idea? What is the future? What is the vision that if this idea comes true, the world will look like, right? Why are we even doing this? So this purpose, this why, the vision, that's the very first step of starting to communicate to people and start having people who are sympathetic to you and to the idea and to this vision and everything to join. And then different people join in different ways. Some people join with their advice and expertise. Some people join with their hard work, and some people will join with offering investments and things like that. So it really is about creating a small movement around walking a journey towards creating a world in which we can have this cutting edge mental health support accessible to everybody. I'm not the only one who wants the world to be a good place. Almost everybody I know is like that. Different people have different ideas for it, but we all want it to be a better place for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren. If we don't have children, for the people around us, the ones we love. So, and then when you try to kind of find people who connect with how you think a better world look like, then that's it. Then you start creating a mass that you can then give you momentum. And from there, you lean onto this team. People want to believe that, like sometimes you hear these hero stories of how someone built a multi-billion-dollar company or changed the world and like whatever, right? I don't know. I don't believe in that. At least for my case, it's very much people around me. This is a work that I can, every single person I can count and say, this is their contribution. This bit is theirs. That bit is theirs. I guess the bit that I contribute is just my never dying excitement and drive and my appreciation and my gratitude towards the people who are helping make that vision come to reality.
Who were those people? What expertise did you need to have on your team to accomplish your goal? What were those main building blocks of what eventually happened?
So, to be honest, of course, at the beginning, I made some very big mistakes, which if I had the experience I have right now, I wouldn't repeat.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what is the right way to go after, rather the one that I've learned the hard way. So if you're building a product, it is very important. Like the most important thing is to have someone who knows how to manage build of a product. Think about, you want to build a house. You can have the best carpenters, you can have the best bricklayers, you can have, but if you don't have a good manager who can organize everybody, plan it ahead, and like figure it out, and then like help execute it, you will waste a lot of time, effort, talent, and you might not even end up with a house. You will end up with a door and a window and this and that, right? So it's very important for anybody who wants to start a company. The very first person you need to find is that superstar product manager. That is the person that will make all the difference. And then from there, of course, if you are a deep science company, you need to have the best scientists supporting you. If you're a deep tech company, you need to have the best technologists supporting you. So that's the thing. It really matters. So founding a company is a very lonely and hard journey. You're doing something that has never been done before. You constantly need to convince people why this is the way to go. And of course, as the success keeps coming in, it becomes easier to convince because now people can see, right? But when you're just an idea to begin with, you need to become really good at explaining yourself. And my thought is, and my suggestion to anybody who wants to start this journey is, if people don't get it, or if you hear a no, or if people say, what is this? It doesn't mean that your idea is bad. What it means is you didn't explain it well enough. If their comment doesn't make sense, And if their comment makes sense, that's an area of growth. So be thankful. That is one rejection, but that one rejection can help you gain a yes next. So that's what I mean is lonely and hard, because most people, when they hear rejection, they take it personally. And that is a hard sort of growth experience to have, to use it as, okay, now I know where my faults are and how I'm going to fix it, rather than, oh my gosh, they don't like it. How can they not like it? And get angry at the world. And yeah, and accepting, it's a very humbling journey as well, because you suddenly realize how you're bad at almost everything because you push to your extreme. Can you explain things well? Is your vision even making sense? Have you thought about this? Are you hurting people? Are you helping people? What are the niche nuisances here and there? Now you need to start thinking about a lot of things that you had not thought before. And it's a very humbling experience. It really shows you all your, limits. Let's put it that way.
Some of our listeners are actually asking our guests to share maybe some mistakes that they've done along the way, and the way they changed the things, the way they overcame what they were doing, maybe not in the best way possible. Would you be willing to share, something from your experience that, yes, it wasn't perfect, but you learned from it and did something already in a different way?
Absolutely. I mean, that list is very, very long. But let me start with the most, with the one that took me like, it was like, wow. The insight and the realization gave me that wow moment. And maybe your listeners know this already, but this was for me the case where I wasn't as aware of how distinctively different being nice is to being kind. So that is very important. If you're managing and if you are responsible, you cannot afford to be nice, but you have to be kind. And these two are very different. And initially, I was mixing them up together because I don't want to hurt people, right? And I like to be positive and encouraging and that can sometimes blur the boundary where one leans into being nice to a person rather than being kind to them. And I give you an example. And this is something I'm trying to do now differently. If someone in the team was underperforming, I would try to just tell them, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. So no, next time and so forth. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Being nice to them, trying to make them feel not too bad about it. Like I was scared of making them feel uncomfortable. So I just didn't want them to be uncomfortable. So I would go to the length so that while it was their underperformance, that was now there was lots of slack that often I had to pick or other people. But now I am realizing the kind thing to say would be, you made a mistake. Let's work together how this doesn't happen again. So what is it that led to it? Let us work together so that we can both grow, the company, me, you, everybody. So this mistake is avoidable next time. And if it's not avoidable, help me understand why it's not avoidable, because I cannot put you in the position of responsibility if you keep repeating these mistakes, because then others have to pay for it. And to say it in a kind way without making it personal about them, but making it about the reality of it, which is about mistakes happen because we don't know. So let's uncover the unknown and support you and everybody so it doesn't happen again. That is the kind thing to do. And that makes a massive difference. People are, in the first instance, when you're being nice to people, it leads to feelings of lethargy, entitlement, confusion. Boundaries are not very clear. People don't know how far is far. But when you're being kind and you draw the boundaries very firm and you tell people what the expectations are and telling them, I'm happy to support you, just tell me what you need, that is kindness. And that was one of the greatest lessons I learned.
And what changed in the company, in the way people were doing things when you made the shift from being nice to being kind?
So at some point, I realized people keep talking about, oh, they're meant like they are unmotivated. And they started to severely underperform without realizing they're underperforming. And a sense of entitlement started growing. It was a little bit like they were not everybody, because some people had the maturity to draw the boundaries by themselves, and me being nice, they would just take it as a signal and move on. But not everybody was like that. They sort of became like my toddlers, where they expecting constant understanding regardless of what the situation was. And that, I don't know what the word for it is, but that sort of infantization was the what happened? These are very like, it was disabling and enabling group of people who otherwise were really talented and good. And I was thinking quite a lot about what gave, what happened, what went wrong here. And I had a set of advisors that I was talking to, and they helped me because they were more senior, seasoned managers. And they helped me understand that I was mistaking niceness for kindness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And now my question is about your computational neuroscience background. What were the main skills you found are absolutely necessary, that are essential for you when building this product? So what did you bring from your studies that now you were able to utilize?
So I don't contribute as much as I wish to the science. I have, Alena has scientists who are very, very talented and a lot more versed in the matter than I am. But what I am bringing from my studies is this vision, this idea of how are we going to go about this, and the scientific understanding of how to build something. So the way we're building Alena is quite different compared to how a product is usually built. We test every step of the way. We make efficacy, effectiveness, data protection, all of those things are priority. And it is very watertight from day one. We don't give any slacks to anything. So for me, it's like if there is no data to support what's there, it shouldn't be there. So everything is data driven. And we build it very much through listening to people who use Alena. So even though we have the scientific underpinning, the build and creation of Alena is driven by people who are ultimately using it. And that user-led creation of the product is something that I did not bring from the world of science, because if anything, from world of science is a little bit top down. But this came from my experience, my life experiences, where, as I told you, when I realized that applied science makes sense if people understand what it is, if they can use it. Otherwise, you haven't successfully translated it. And that's why these two bits need to come together. And that makes it really hard compared to abstract science, where you just need to take care of the science.
Mm-hmm. So tell our listeners what Alena is. What does it do?
So Alena is a medical device. It's a digital medical device. And that's a fancy word for saying it's clinically approved by the authorities for treatment of social anxiety. So social anxiety is pretty common. Out of every 8 people, 1 person has social anxiety. And that is, they're being diagnosed. In reality, the number is higher. Most people think of social anxiety as being shy, introverted, getting tired easily, and having a fear of speaking or not enjoying parties as much as other people. But these are all like signatures of social anxiety. And you go on, it's an app, it's available in the App Store. You go on the App Store in the UK. So you go on the App Store, and what you can do is download it and you start doing these assessments, which measures cognitive processes. You play a game, and then at the end, it tells you the health of the cognitive process. And then from there, you get the intervention if it's needed, that would modify that specific cognitive process. And that is how it helps people overcome social anxiety. Now, there is no human in the loop. Everything is fully automated. And within 4 weeks, 70% of people start seeing clinical level improvement. It's very concise, and that's what we call precision psychiatry. There isn't much material to cover, but if you cover that little bit, that's enough. That's all the person needs. And this 4 weeks for 70% of people stands as opposed to if you see a human therapist, it takes about 12 weeks for 50% of people to see the same level of improvement. So yeah, it helps.
Yes, very interesting. Can you maybe provide a couple of examples of social anxiety, maybe even case studies that happens, and then we can talk about how the app might help them?
Sure, absolutely. So I tell you a little bit about like how social anxiety usually manifests in people. And then I tell you about a case study that this person actually reached out and told us. So, social anxiety in general is a fear of a negative judgment of other people about us. So, that's kind of like the gist of it. For example, for some people that are our users, one of them, she was suffering from interacting with her in laws because she believed that her in laws don't think highly of her. And if they do nice things for her, it comes with bad intentions. So there is no way for these poor in-laws to do anything. That was it. Like she was getting very anxious and worked up about just seeing these people. And that was really affecting her marriage and her relationship with her husband for reasons we can think of. And or for example, for other people, it could be they get very anxious and nervous about giving a speech or giving a talk to a group of people, maybe a school performance or asking for promotion. It's a very anxiety-inducing effect for people with social anxiety.
Like job interview.
Job interviews,
yes.
Exactly, something like that. Or going on a date, talking to the teacher of one's child, or you name it, or being on the bus and being nervous about how people are looking at them, going to parties, not enjoying it because of being worried about what other people think about them. Now, these are all signatures of social anxiety. It limits the person from enjoying social situations. So instead of seeing people as a positive signal, they could see some people as a threat, a negative signal that would make them uncomfortable and judge them and be not nice to them, and them not having a control over what happens next. Now we had the extreme version of it, the severe version of it, stops people from leaving the house altogether. And during COVID lockdown, this got really worse for some people, because usually if you go out every now and then, you see it's all fine. But if you're locked in, you don't get that exposure and that all dies away. So the brain falls back to what biologically it is. And that can be very, very difficult. Now, we had this lady who agreed to have like this interview, and she was okay with us to use as a user case, where she said that she had not gone to a hairdresser for 7 years. And the first time she went to a hairdresser was after she used Alena. And that gave her the ability to go to the hairdresser and to enjoy it. We had users who told us that they had helped police solve a crime in their neighborhood, while before they would just close the door and do not want to be involved in anything. We had users who said they had spoken to their parents. They hadn't spoken to the parents for 2 years, and this gave them the ability to do that. So this is very rewarding, to have people be able to initiate these healthy connections that just enriches their lives. And that's the thing that makes us keep going.
Those are beautiful case studies. And how many people at the moment are using the app and getting the help and support they need?
So we have about 4,000 people who are using the app, a little bit over 4,000 people.
And what is the possibility for other people to use it? Now you mentioned that it's available only in UK. What are other options for other people, and what are you planning in terms of making it available to a broader community?
Absolutely, yes. So in 2024, we are planning to expand and offer Alena to other places too, starting with America. So we start the process of getting FDA approval because it's a clinical device. And so we will be rolling it to the US and hopefully available to people there to enjoy.
That is amazing. I'm sure so many people will benefit from this app. And now I have a couple of questions because we're talking about the careers. And what are the skills that you are looking in your potential employees? Yeah, so if people are thinking about if we would like to work in a company like that and contribute to all these amazing things the app is creating, what would be those skills that you as an employer are looking?
So the hard skills, which are the skills that have to do with the specific field they will be contributing to, for example, for scientists or for content creators or for designers. So the hard skills, of course, there are ways to interview and assess, right, at what level they are. For the soft skills, which is sort of like spread across everybody, I am looking for a few things. One of them is drive. So it matters to me to find people who are impact driven and they are determined to leave an imprint and they want to change their lives because working for a startup is hard. It is very hard. It requires intense hours and pressure. And you need people that for them, the impact they have is rewarding. So that is something that is motivating for them. These are people who often, what I find is throughout their life, they have been very proactive in changing their environment, in lending a hand and being helpful to others. These are people who care. They are very caring people. So that drive and impact driven personality, this is the first thing that I always look for. The other one is resilience. So I need someone who is able to keep going despite things looking very hard because we're trying to build something that has never been built before. We're not replicating an existing blueprint, right? So we will be facing a lot of challenges that could disappoint and demotivate majority of people. But if this person has a resilient character where they would say, I don't care. This is a puzzle I will solve, or I will find people who help me solve this puzzle. They look at challenges as puzzles to be solved rather than walls to be avoided. So that's the other personality trait that I keep looking for. And the next one that is very important, and of course the list could go on, but I will stop at this one, is that these are positive, kind people who know how to take joy in little things life can offer. So we could go and have lunch together and enjoy it. And we could have a moment in the office and have a laugh together. And it's a heavy work to do. So it's important to be with people who don't get heavier and heavier and heavier, but are able to take a break from the complexity of the thing they're solving, block it in their mind somewhere, 5 minutes, just be light and enjoy, and then go back again to the complexity. So this compartmentalization of challenge versus fun is something I always look for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. And for those people in neuroscience, yes, maybe computational neuroscience, maybe neural engineering, I don't know. So, any of those fields, what specialist are you looking for from the neuroscience field?
Yes. So we're looking for computational neuroscientists or computational psychiatrists who have been creating these models of cognitive processes, or we're interested in people who have a background in cognitive neuroscience, meaning that they understand the cognitive processes that underlie behavior and action and emotion and all of those things. And of course, it also, we have psychologists and psychotherapists in our midst because they're the ones who understand most about the current psychotherapeutic interventions and treatments that are out there, and they can like, that is the place where they share knowledge and expertise with us.
Oh, wonderful. It's so good to know. Good that you mentioned. We have many people who are listening from those disciplines. And at least now they know where their contribution is also needed in what
Yes.
type of work. So thank you. Thank you very much for mentioning that. And like you said, the startup and creating a new product, it's very challenging. So can you name one of the biggest challenge you had throughout this process, and how did you solve it?
Wow. There were lots of big challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges was alignment within my team. And this is very hard because, as I said, the responsibility lies with the founder to be able to explain their vision in a way that is very concrete, is coherent, and can connect a distant future through various milestones back in time to the actions the team is taking today. So, in a way, the team understands why. Why am I building this feature? Why am I working on this research? Why are we spending money here? It matters. So then you could thread it all the way forward back to that future. That is very hard to go from that macro level to micro and out back again. So that has been a big challenge. And I don't know if I have fully solved it or not. But in some ways, I am very lucky to be with a team who has very similar views. And they have similar backgrounds, similar views. So when I draw the picture, like through conversations or documents, they can also ask the right questions. So then I can answer those questions rather than I don't understand, explain it more. They tell me specifically what is the point of confusion. So then I could like clarify it. So that's why I'm still like, this is a challenge, but with the right team, it's easy to solve.
Yes. And you mentioned that micro scale and macro scale. Speaking about that macro scale, about the future, how do you see the future of your apps in 10 years, 20 years from now?
That is very hard. I can tell you what we are dreaming. But whether it comes to reality or not, there is so much of it that is in our hands. But in 10 years, we are hoping for Alena to be covering the major mental illnesses in a way that is affordable. Like this is a digital solution. So in terms of affordability, it can get cheaper than that. And we can then help people not only just in English speaking countries, but also in other countries, like through translation of language and hopefully maybe some cultural modifications of the treatments and all of that. So we're hoping to be digital mental health provider that is fully automated, has fully automated the entire care pathway and has a global presence, changing people's lives every corner of this planet.
That's a beautiful vision. Are you thinking of expanding the current social anxiety application in the world globally, or you also are thinking about adding new components? Both.
Both. So both in terms of market for each product, so social anxiety everywhere, but we also will add new mental health conditions such as depression, generalized anxiety, and so forth.
That's beautiful. And of course, I wish you all possible success with that. And right now, we have really an explosion of machine learning, AIs, technological developments and advances. What uh, advances in current technologies are inspiring you in your journey with Alena, with building that mental health support, digital support for people?
Yes. So it is very intriguing to see all these new advancements that we see. And the bit of it that I'm most excited about is it has inspired people to start talking about how are we folding this kind of new technology into our lives. So currently, we don't use any of them in the app for people because we know how they're built, and they, as impressive and amazing as they are not equipped to support people in their vulnerable states. And that is why in our solution, we are keeping it very simple to the point of where we know for sure this can help someone in their most vulnerable states. However, I think this is going to change in the future where you could put in guardrails and train them and all of those things that you can put into place. And meanwhile, the bit of it that I'm most interested about is this ethics and regulations that come around all of these new technologies. Because this is different. The world is entering a state that is very different, something that we've never ever experienced before. Think about when industrial revolution happened, that was quite a change, but the changes were visible. These were physical machines that we could see their impact. We could see the soot on the walls. We could see the trays on the mud. We could see what it's doing, right? So everybody could then chime together and think about better air quality, how to make these machines safe. You could see what it is doing, right? Now that visibility doesn't exist when it comes to the current information revolution that we are having. The impact you're having in people's lives is very invisible. You can't see it. And how are we going to deal with that? Should we not talk about it? People tend to not worry about things they don't see. But this can be it can have quite devastating effects if you're not vigilant about it. So to me, it matters that people who understand how these tools and technologies are developed to be vocal about it, and for the governments to start introducing exactly how do you measure what footprint this thing has in people's lives, right? And use that to make these algorithms and technology better and safer for people. Because at the end of the day, it's not the strength of a technology that will change humanity's course, but it's safety. Imagine if industrial revolution had gone on however it had gone on, we had things that had much stronger effect that we have today. For example, DDT, I don't know if you know about it or not, but this was a pesticide that was very effective. It was incredible, amazing. But then it created birth defects in humans. It started creating an environmental impact that we could see, right? So even though it was strong and effective and useful, we decided not to use it anymore, right? And we need to be thinking the same way about the current inventions and innovations and not be carried away about its effectiveness and usefulness, but also think, is it safe? What kind of future is this thing creating for us?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Those are very important things to consider with the current developments. And now I would like to circle back to the question that you had in mind when you were starting your journey about the limits, yes, of people that people are very often imposing on themselves, yes, that are in our mind. How far can we push those limits to create an impact in this world? So you had a long journey already. What can you say now? At this point of your journey, after learning so much already about those limits and possibility to expand them?
Yeah, I think, well, a lot has happened since I asked that question. The world is very, very, very different. And I think lots of those limits are already being lifted by many technologies that are out there. I gave the example of Google Map. So that is an example of how limits have been lifted, because there are some people that biologically they're wired in a way they can't find direction. You can give them a map, you can put them in a place, but they can't orient themselves. They can get lost. So this means that even these people, they were limited in how mobile they were in their lives, because they would risk being lost, or they had to spend a fortune on trying to get from place A to B. Now, with something such as Google Map, they don't have that problem. They have this thing that constantly tells them turn right, turn left. Now you've arrived at your destination. So already that process being impaired is nil. It doesn't matter anymore. Now they can go from point A to point B without a problem. And it won't cost them a fortune. And now they can do it, while before they couldn't. And so forth. And like, for example, something as simple as Google. People sometimes forget how young actually Google is compared to humanity, right? But I remember there was a time where I had to go to the library and go through all these little cards and find the index and go and find the book and I had to bring it back and I had to go through the book to find it. I don't think like anybody does that anymore, right? Now you go on Google and you do a search and you can exactly find the right page. Even historical data you can retrieve. That is a way that if you used to have the barrier of being limited to the library in your hometown and being good at finding those index cards and books, now you're not limited by that. You could sit at seaside and read the latest development in science at your fingertip. That is impressive. Yeah. So, or another thing, another barrier is language. Yeah. There's a time where you would go somewhere and unless you could speak the language or you had English as a common language, it would be hard to understand, read the signs and all of those things. But there is these instant translations that you could use your camera, just hold it on the text and it instantly translates it for you. Or I communicate with people here, they don't speak English, but we just use that translation tool. There is no barrier there. I don't even feel like we don't speak the same language. You can make that human connection. So it's beautiful. I think we are getting to that place where lots of these barriers will become invisible because there are ways to step over them and reach the beyond.
Absolutely. What are the barriers you think will be broken as we move forward and with all the technological developments we're having at the moment?
I think if you think about a very distant future, quite likely lots of things will become possible to overcome. Like we already have, even when we think about like bionic organs and things like that, right? Even those are happening. I can see a future in which right now we have a lot of invisible disabilities that people don't even notice. And that is a barrier that my hope is, and that is definitely what we're trying to do with Alena, to overcome. And from our side, those invisible barriers are in the cognitive processes that stops a person from doing things or achieving things. And we try to give them those tools. Examples are, something as simple as, for example, social anxiety. It is an invisible barrier to not go and ask for that promotion. That is impacting quality of life. and being able to use a tool so that you can go and ask that promotion, to me, that is overcoming that barrier and going beyond that. Also, awareness is increasing, which is good. We're becoming more and more aware about how people are different from each other, and it's okay to be different. There's nothing wrong with that. And we be accepting of each other and creating space for each other. That already makes some of those man-made barriers already go away. I was reading an article this morning, which was about the story of marathon, where in 1960, 60 something or 60s, there was this lady who ran the Boston Marathon, and women were not allowed to run that because the idea was women are too fragile to do that kind of running. They haven't tried to do housework to understand fragility. But this lady did it, and it made a big bang, and it was a horrendous thing she did, and whatnot, right? Now, that is a man-made barrier in the sense that we believe we can't, but the reality is very different. And I think as the awareness increases and we become accepted that, well, let us just try it first and then decide whether we can or cannot, things will change for the better.
Yeah, let's use scientific method, yes, instead of just deciding.
Yes.
Yes, that's a beautiful future without the barriers, or at least with the minimized barriers that we can achieve. If you would summarize what becomes possible with Alena that wasn't possible before, what would that be?
It would be for everybody on every corner of this planet, to have the ability to access the cutting edge mental health support that is state of the art on that day. And to me, Alena, achieving that will make the world a different place.
Thank you so much. Can you tell our listeners where they can learn about the things you do and maybe connect with you, contact you with the questions or suggestions, or maybe suggestions to collaborate, yes, and do some things together?
Absolutely. So you can find more about us on alena.com, ALENA.com, alena.com. Or everybody is more than welcome to write me an email. I love to hear from people. As I said to you, I'm a fan of everybody's stories. And my email address is mahmadi@alena.com. It is mahmadi@alena.com. And yeah, I would love to hear it, even if it's to have a chat, to have a conversation, to think together. I would love that.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there will be people writing and communicating, and we will add all this information into our podcast notes. So our listeners will be able to find it there as well. As we are nearing already at the end of our podcast, what would be your maybe last piece of advice for our listeners, or anything you would like to mention before we end our podcast?
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast, and thank you very much to everybody for listening to our conversation and our thoughts. And people who are listening to this podcast clearly are eager to learn, and they are the ones to change the world. And my ask is keep going. Don't let anything get in your way. There is nobody. If you think, why is this world not changing? Then maybe the one that's missing is you. Maybe you're the one that would make the change. So yeah, keep going, no matter how hard it is. Every little counts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ahmadi. That is a great, great, great suggestion. And thank you for being our amazing podcast guest. I wish you all possible success, you and your team, with developing Alena and making the digital healthcare available at every part of our world. It's so, so much needed. So thank you.